Greetings. I am Dr. Lauren Apter Bairnsfather, Director of the Holocaust Center of Pittsburgh, and I am honored to moderate this post-film discussion about the film When Hitler Stole Pink Rabbit. The Holocaust Center of Pittsburgh connects the horrors of the Holocaust and anti-Semitism with injustices of today. Through education, the Holocaust Center empowers individuals to build a more civil and humane society, and we're currently marking our 40th year. The Holocaust Center partners with Film Pittsburgh when we can, and for several years we've sponsored a film in the JFilm Festival, and we work closely with the excellent Teen Screen program. This year's film, When Hitler Stole Pink Rabbit, is based on the beloved book by the same name by author and illustrator Judith Kerr. This book is a staple of Holocaust education in England, where Kerr lived until her death in 2019 at the age of 95. The story derives from her childhood experience, fleeing Nazi Germany with her parents and brother in 1933, in the first days of Jewish persecution in Germany that would culminate years later in World War II, the Holocaust, and the killing of approximately 6 million Jews. The film begins and ends before the beginning of the war, with the family's safe immigration to England after several years living in Switzerland and France. In 1933, as the Nazis rose to power, some Jewish families saw the writing on the wall and recognized the risk they faced. While at that time, and it's important to keep this in mind, no one could foresee the Holocaust to come. In 1933, nobody knew the Holocaust was coming. Jewish persecution, yes. Mass murder, genocide, no. Most of you who are with us today will have read as students The Diary of a Young Girl, or the play based on the diary, which is called The Diary of Anne Frank. As did the Frank family, the Kempner family, later Kerr, sought refuge outside of Germany, but still inside Europe. What differentiates the Kerr family's experience from the Frank families is that the Kerrs were able to settle in England, which was not occupied by the Nazis. As we are all painfully aware, the Frank family settled in Amsterdam, where they were eventually discovered in hiding and deported from the Netherlands. And while Otto Frank, the father, survived, everyone else perished. The conversation today provides an opportunity to learn about a current pressing human need. Also, we will hear about an excellent local organization and from a woman who has come to Pittsburgh. So we'll hear her story too. At this moment, if you're following the news, you will have heard about a situation at our southern border. Violence, climate change, rising poverty, and COVID-19 are forcing thousands of people from northern Central America and other regions in crisis to flee their homes. So right now what we're seeing at the border is a number of unaccompanied children arriving. And I saw it on the news last night and the night before, videos, photographs. I think that this is all in our consciousness at this point. And it's not a new situation. I mean, it changes, the details change, but this has been happening at the border for many years. And I watched this from close up while I lived in Texas not that long ago. So this is an ongoing humanitarian crisis, and we're seeing the results of that movement of people at our border. Every April, is a significant month for Holocaust remembrance and for genocide awareness, and for awareness of human rights and human crises. So it is that much more meaningful to host this timely conversation about the current global refugee crisis. I want to thank JFilm, Catherine Spitz-Cohan, and Lori Sisson for facilitating this discussion today, and our guests, whom I will introduce now. I am so excited to welcome our special guests. Hi, everyone.
Hi.
Hi. Rosamaria Cristello is the founder and executive director of the Latino Community Center in Pittsburgh. The Latino Community Center empowers, advocates with, and celebrates Latinos in Allegheny County, which is Western Pennsylvania around Pittsburgh. The LCC is a self-standing and independent nonprofit organization that was founded by representation of the Latinx community for our Latinx community. I'm so happy that you're here. We will share slightly longer bios later. We are also joined by Don Brubaker. Don is Dr. Don Brubaker, excuse me. You should have your credential. You earned it. Don is the owner of Daybreaking Ideas, a consulting company that develops and implements professional training on diversity and inclusion, intercultural communication, and creating trauma-informed environments. Dawn is experienced in social work education as adjunct faculty and program development. And there's more. We're excited to hear from you. For this conversation, Dawn will be drawing on her work with refugee resettlement and her dissertation, which is completely about this, Challenges of Refugee Resettlement, Policy and Psychosocial Factors. Her dissertation, Strengths-Based Theory, Direct Practice with Immigrants and Forced Migrant Populations. I am so excited to learn from you, Dawn. Thank you for being with us. And then we have Andrea Peraza. Andrea moved to the USA in 2016 from El Salvador. She graduated from Bashir High School in 2018 and started college in fall of 2018. She's now in her second year of college at CCAC and is majoring in business management. She first got involved with the Latino Community Center in late 2017. She was one of the first students LCC helped get into college. That is so exciting, and congratulations. So we'll hear more from everyone, but first, Dawn, I wanted to ask you, I rushed through that. Thank you all. I'm so excited to be here with you and to talk about these things, because it's a rare opportunity to hear about these from people who are really knowledgeable, or some of you have had these experiences yourselves. Dawn, I'm wondering if you could help us to understand the language that we use about refugees and migrants and immigrants. It's a lot of terminology that I think is sometimes misused and misunderstood.
Yeah, and I think that there is a geopolitical context when we use terms like refugee or asylee, because they are defined by the United Nations and then by our own legislation and policy. We have the Refugee Act of 1980, which defines it and provides resources at the federal level. So a refugee is actually defined as somebody who has experienced persecution and has a well-founded fear of persecution about their race, religion, nationality, membership in a particular social group or political opinion, right? So a person has to be a refugee, a person has had to flee their country of birth or their national country and go to another country. And then in that country, they apply for refugee status to UNHCR. They go to the United Nations High Commission for Refugees and apply for status. Once they're granted status, they're a refugee. Less than 1% of that population is resettled to another country. So that's a really important. And of the over 70 million people who have been either internally or externally displaced, only 15 million have refugee status. So it's, there's a lot of people who don't count in those numbers. And last year we had an all-time low of 15,500 refugees to resettle. And now it's been increased by the current administration to 62,500. And next year they hope to increase it to 125,000. And of that, 5,000 of the 62,500, 5,000 of that is earmarked for Central America and the Caribbean. So an asylee is someone who comes directly to the country of asylum. So if they have a fear of persecution and they come directly to the United States without going through the UNHCR and they come here, they can apply for asylum. Now, they're not granted asylum immediately. They apply for asylum, which has a cost. And then they have to go through a period of time where they wait for their case to be heard. And they have to prove the same thing that a refugee does, because it's in the same act. So they have to prove that they have a reasonable fear of persecution and fit into one of the groups. And the US has to recognize that country as a country where refugees can come from. And I think that's a really big piece of what we're seeing in the southern border, because if the US doesn't recognize that population as fleeing persecution, if there's economic turmoil, if they feel there's a destabilization in the government, but there's not this fear of persecution, then they won't necessarily earmark it as a refugee population. However, that doesn't mean that people are not fleeing for their lives. So there's a difference there in perspective. And many, at the moment, people who are coming in from the southern border are stuck between two administrations and the policies of those administrations. And so how they get processed really at this point determines on where they're crossing. So that's huge. And then an immigrant is somebody who comes as a permanent resident. So they're coming to stay. So they might have a green card or they might get a permanent resident card. They might have come as a refugee and then they naturalized and became a citizen. Then they're a citizen, but they came with the intention of staying. But the difference between a forced migrant is they didn't choose to come, where an immigrant chooses to come. I want to go to the US to study and then to work in the university, or I want to go to the US to work at this company and I'm going to pursue my green card. I'm going to marry someone. Family reunification is huge. But there's family reunification within the forced migrant population. And then there's family reunification of people who are immigrating and then they're bringing family over. One other population real quick is trafficking. And trafficking is very complicated because it's a T visa. You don't get to apply for asylum. You have to testify against the person who has enslaved you. So it's very, very difficult. Those are the big ones.
Well, and I mean, we're talking in many of these cases of an extremely traumatic experience, and so when my context is more thinking of Jewish refugees at the time of the Holocaust, both before and after, where there were similar obstacles, where countries did not want to take the refugees. Refugee was not even a word in use at some points of it, but we use it even though it's not exactly the word that would have been used then, but it's similar. And I wanted to ask you one question, and I thank you for helping us understand the complexity of this, because it's extremely complex. You mentioned that now our country will allow, you said it was more than 62,000, but it's 62,000 something refugees.
62,500 for 2021.
How many people are seeking refuge just in general?
At the moment, it's more than 75 million. And we have to understand too, you have destabilization, and like in Syria, we also have Yemen. There's the Rohingya incident, and then the Myanmar coup that just occurred a few weeks ago. We have Colombia. There's so many areas where people are leaving, and another issue that comes up, if you have a natural disaster, an earthquake, and you have to leave because your entire area is flooded, and you go to another country, well, you're displaced in your country. We worked with people in the past. I worked with people who came from the Hurricane Katrina and resettled in Pittsburgh. So it's so tricky, and we really need to recognize this global move, because many people are being identified as out of status or undocumented, or they're being identified as internationals when really they're forced migrants. If you ask them what would have happened, they would have said, I would want to go home. But if I do go home, either there is no home left, or
the scope of this is so chilling. And so I thank you for that response, so we can put it in context. And I mean, we're talking about, when we talk about the history that we teach, we talk about a global humanitarian crisis, and we have the same thing happening now. We really have a global humanitarian crisis.
Exactly. And I think that that's really a good perspective to have on it, is that, and the director of the Migration Policy Institute was talking about the importance of understanding our own political history and the impact that has had on destabilizing Central America and the economy in many countries. And so we're all interconnected in a very real way. So it's important to recognize that.
That gives me such a great transition to Rosamaria, to think about the ways that we are all interconnected. And I would love for all of us to hear more about the organization that you run and lead, and what you do, and who you serve in Pittsburgh, and who are our neighbors. This is a great chance for us to get to know our neighbors.
Yeah, absolutely. So at the Latino Community Center, we primarily serve Latinos. regardless of their immigration status. We help children, youth, and families really just make Pittsburgh and Allegheny County their home. And it's really important to understand our history and why we were founded. I myself am from Guatemala. I grew up undocumented, and all of this in Arlington, Virginia. And so for anyone who has been there, you know that it's very rich with diverse communities there. So growing up, I had no idea that I was, different. I didn't know that my parents tried to shield us a lot from our status and all of that. And that was, a lot had to do with the place that wherever we went, there were interpreters. People did not shy away from helping people that didn't know English, for example, right? My school, I was put in a Spanish immersion school, and that was a public school, and so on. And so when I moved to Pittsburgh, I came here for graduate school, and I spoke perfect English, I think, or semi-perfect English, and I was discriminated against, and I just started to realize, like, wow, Pittsburgh's Latino community is way smaller than Arlington, obviously, but it's growing. And when I started to pay attention and look around at like who was here, a lot of the families that I saw and got to meet and start to work with were families like mine, who were primarily undocumented. They had just arrived to the United States. And I started to just kind of put everything together and see it as an opportunity to create something that I wish would have existed when my family was here. So we built the Latino Community Center with a group of parents, and we have been just really, I think, instrumental in helping right now I think we're up to 800 families that we've, worked with that have really helped both the children in their education journey, but the parents as well, and dealing with that harder stuff, like connecting with immigration attorneys, helping with basic needs support, food insecurity. Right now with COVID, it's been a lot of just trying to get our community on the same level as everyone else, and understanding what's happening with the vaccines, what's happening with, when COVID first hit. We had families calling us saying, what is going on? I went to the store and there's no toilet paper. We're like, there's a pandemic. And so, we've kind of played that role. But we see a lot of families that have really just horrible stories, and it's really tough because we hear the stories and then we see the news of how people just don't get it, on how we really need to be there for families now. This is really a humanitarian thing, and they cannot wait for policies to change. Like they cannot wait for the law to change to get support for just to have a decent life. So we're here to both provide the immediate support, but also drive change. And I think a big part of how we're trying to do that is through our youth, which Andrea is a big example of. And, we can't do it alone. So we're trying to pour to them on how to really take the baton and run with it. So get them into college, get them a good education, etc.
And we first met at a program that we were lucky enough to do together when you were at the Latino Family Center. Oh. And I think there were 90 people there. It was an incredible event and so warm. And for me, because I was in Texas for so long, as I mentioned, I'm used to a bilingual environment. Yeah. And we really don't have that here. And we had an exhibit at the Holocaust Center that was bilingual in English and Spanish, and people who saw it asked, why is it in Spanish? Mm-hmm. And we need to get away from that kind of thinking. We need a more inclusive way of knowing about who's here and how we can communicate with them. Andrea, I would love to hear from you. And then I want to encourage you to ask questions of each other now. I mean, we have a lot of experiences and expertise here, and I don't want to miss something that Rosamaria, you'll know that you should ask Andrea. So thank you, Andrea, for being with us. And I would love to hear a little bit more about your journey that brought you to Pittsburgh, if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure. Well, I just say I came from El Salvador. I learned English here, so if you see my accent, that's fine. um, but I came here in 2016. My mom was already here, and my two brothers. I came as a asylee, as Dr. Graham was playing. I came, I crossed the border, the immigration caught me, and I was for a shelter for like 6 months. And I moved to Pittsburgh because my mom was in New York. My mom is a single mom, and the rent there is like so expensive, and she could afford with 3 kids. So I was in my process, in my immigration process during my time in high school. It was really difficult try to handle high school plus an immigration process because I was always worried what's going to happen with me. Was in 2017. I turned 18 and they sent me a letter that my asylum was approved and I was really happy. I got my permit to work and my social security number and I was like, okay, what's next? I didn't know where to start to find a college. I was like, what am I gonna do? I can go to college. There's like some barriers. I wasn't able to speak like English. It was always like struggling with English and I was like, what are you gonna do? Rosa and Sofia, they came to Brazil through our Spanish teacher. I met them and I asked them, I want to go to college. One time, Rosa showed to my house. My mom was making tamales, and it was really exciting because I was like, I really want to give back to the Latino Community Center what they give to me, the opportunity to go to college, the opportunity to speak up, because it wasn't for there. I was not able to go to college. I was maybe in the restaurant right now, working as a cleaning house or something like that, because it's really hard here in Pittsburgh. And no use for the Latino community right now, serving with AmeriCorps, it has been like, show me that it's not only us, we're struggling with the language barrier, with the language communication, with some benefits during this pandemic, because some benefits are there, but they're not available for everyone here. They asked for some documentation and they were like the families like how I can get this, how I can go through this if they ask me for this and I don't have this. Because sometimes the families they can with the passport, but immigration talk when they cross the border or when they arrive here, they talk their passport and they're like, where I can go to get my passport, how I get a new one if there's like nothing close to them or someone that can help them to get those documents again. So it's been like this year really open eyes for me. They show me that it's not only my community that's struggling with, and in the Latino Community Center, we try to do what best we can to help our community to support them. But I saw this not only us.
It's so important for us to have awareness of that. Rosamaria, do you have any follow-up questions to that for Andrea?
No, I mean, I think I just keep thinking of like the mental health of our community is just, you know, big. And I think right now I'm noticing that there's more awareness around Latinx therapists coming up and they're being more vocal, which is great. And one of the things that I read the other day is, you know, that really hit me is most of us, like undocumented individuals and immigrants, it's, you know, when someone passes away from our family, we don't go to funerals. Like we just don't because we can't. Most of us can't go back to our countries. So that's grief that we carry, that we can't be there, right? There's a lot of grief of no longer being able to, like, I think of the lemon tree in Guatemala that I used to climb where I felt safe. That's not here. And so there's grief with that, right? There's places in our home countries that we had to leave behind, and it's grief that we've been carrying. And it wasn't until recently that a therapist pointed that out. And I'm like, wow, that is heavy. And that is something that most of us carry, our language, you know, like when I'm in a room where everyone speaks Spanish, oh, it feels so wonderful because I haven't had that in a while. That's grief. That's something that, you know, I grieve every day. And so it just reminded me a lot of when Andrea was talking about. There's a lot that I think our youth go through. I remember at Brashear, Andrea had to go to immigration appointments and then come back and go to school. And at night we were working on her scholarship essays. And like, I mean, that is a lot for students to do. And it can't be, you know, ignored. It has to be recognized that just mental health is a big component of this whole process. And the last thing I'd say, like, you know, Andrea crossed, I crossed, my mom crossed. There's, you know, articles on that. And again, people change when you're crossing the border right now. There's just, you're not the same person when you make it to the other side. And that's a big component of our community right now that we're seeing with our families.
Dawn.
You're muted, Dawn.
So I just wanted to speak to that real quick with two things. One of the areas addressed in NASW has a policy brief on refugee resettlement and the psychosocial factors, but it fits with forced migrants in general, where you have having to leave your home as a trauma, the travel that you have to do as a separate trauma, and then having to integrate into a new area as another trauma. So a colleague of mine, Elizabeth Wrangler, had referred to it as the triple trauma paradigm. And I think that really speaks to what Rosamaria was saying. And then there is a phrase or a term called dysphoria. And used with a capital D, it actually refers to the Jewish populations being separated and having to migrate across multiple places throughout 2,000 years, like just this huge persecution. A small d is any group that has had to deal, or that is coping with being in one culture where they came from another and balancing those two. So, yeah. Thank you both for sharing. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I want to connect that back to the film that everybody will have seen when they're watching this conversation, because it's told through the eyes of a young girl. So she's 9 years old or so. And her mother is working very hard to keep both Anna, as the girl in the movie, keep her and her brother's spirits high, despite what's happening. They are learning new languages everywhere they go. They go from Germany, and then they're in Switzerland and France. They need to learn French. And then they go to England and they need to learn yet another new language within a couple of years' time. The character in the film where we really see the cost to her is the mother. And it's through the character of the mother in the film. And the book and the film are not entirely true, but they're mostly true. You know, they're based on this family's experience. And you really see that. You see what they have to give up by leaving everything behind. And it's very moving. And I think for anyone who's watching this, even more so to hear this from people who have experienced it recently. And we are, to a certain extent, in Pittsburgh and other places, but we're in Pittsburgh, so we can talk about here, removed from the people who are living very close to us, because our lives are in our bubbles. And especially now during a pandemic, when we're not really interacting with people like we might have before. So, I mean, we've focused on the challenges and the struggles, which are really significant, and I'm glad that we're raising awareness about them. And we've heard about the wonderful work of the Latino Community Center and all of the things that you're doing. I wonder, Andrea, if you can share some positive reflections on your experience. What has been good for you about being here?
I'm at the LCC. I have met like really amazing people, and I can go to college. That's something that maybe I couldn't do on my country, because I'm a woman, and it's really bad time in my country. And I'm really happy that here I'm doing what I like, what I love. And this something like the positive thing. My grandma's still in my country, so I miss her. But I'm here with my family, and I really like Pittsburgh. It's a really nice area. I know there is not a lot like services for immigrant families, but I know a lot of communities they keep growing. And every time that I saw a new restaurant, and I know this for like a immigrant family, I'm like, I want to go there. I don't mean it. There is like from any other country, no Latino or Spanish. I'm like, I go to there. I gotta try the food. That's fine. That's what I really like here because there is like a diversity. Like maybe it's like the minimum diversity as the other states or other cities. But it's really nice to see people around here. I would like something changed, obviously, mostly with interpretation. But right now, I'm really happy to be here.
I'm really glad to hear that, and I'm glad that you're having the opportunities that you do, and that we have the opportunity to meet you and learn from you, because it's a two-way street as far as that goes. And the more we know our neighbors, and the more diversity we have, the stronger we are. I mean, we talk about Pittsburgh being stronger than hate, and that we're stronger together. So let's live that is what I say. Like we aim for that, but we have some work to do, and I'm glad that we can be doing this together. So Dawn, I want to come back to you for a minute, because we were just talking a bit about services that are provided for people who have come to Pittsburgh, and Rosamaria, I'd love for you to weigh in on this too. What exists in Pittsburgh to help people who are coming here under these different statuses?
Well, one big program that is a cross-agency program is called ISAC, Immigrant Services and Connections. If you go to isaacpittsburgh.com, you will be able to fill out a referral for, I don't know if it's .org or .com, but you will be able to fill out a referral form, either for yourself or for a person that might need support. And please ask permission, obviously, before you fill it out for someone else. But this way, there's multiple organizations that support people that are dealing with immigration challenges. JFCS has resources, Jewish Family and Community Services. There are other organizations as well that have immigration resources. And so connecting with Isaac, they have service coordinators and office hours, and they can refer you and make sure you get into an organization that has a reputable background, so they can give you the correct support. Because there's for people that are coming from other places, they're vulnerable, and like any vulnerable population, there's a lot of opportunity to be what we call scammed, right? So that's out there. So this is one organization that works really well.
Yeah, I mean, with the Latino community, it's really word of mouth. Like the community just helps each other so much. Which there's even like Facebook groups that are specifically for Latinos, and honestly, people ask anything there, and there's like 10 people responding like, I got you, or like, so it's just that social network I have seen has been getting stronger and stronger. And there's also the free healthcare centers here, clinics, have been fantastic in working with our families as well. So I think word of mouth with the Latino community is very big. The families know more than we do when it comes to services and how to connect people. Yeah.
Okay, so now we've heard about what services are available, but for people who are listening, they're going to want to know what they can do. So what can people who are outside of your community, what can we do? Are there things we can do to be helpful?
There's a lot. No, something that I really, I was like, this is really nice about Pittsburgh. Everyone tried to help you out. At least if you don't speak English, they help you like point something when you ask something. That's something that like really hit on me at the beginning. As I was like, where I have to go. I didn't know anything. I didn't know how to get the trolley. I didn't know how to get the bus. I didn't know how to get there. And how Rosa say our community, they know where you have to go for for a doctor, for a dentist, where to go to get like immigration services. So they know a lot because they already have been like maybe through the process, or they get help through the Latino Family Center a few years ago. Um, but like we would like more and more like communication with other communities. I know it's COVID time. You cannot go to your neighbor and bring their pie, but at least say hi every time that you saw they're outside. Don't came with some comments try to discriminate them, cause it feels really bad when you're trying to be like friend with your neighbor and they were like don't talk to them because they look like this,
Mm.
because they have like really bad ideas about some people, and that's not always the truth. So at least say hi to someone when you see it on the street, or don't try to speak on their language because sometimes it's really weird. And it feels like, okay, you try to speak on my language, but that's not good. Just at least say hi.
But I agree 100%, Andrea. Yeah.
I just wanted to add real quick that volunteering is big. And most organizations that work with immigrant populations need volunteers, and you will receive good training on how to be a supportive ally.
Mhm.
That's good.
Yes, that's true.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, especially right now with remote learning, et cetera, we've been able to pair volunteers with students that needed that extra educational support, and that's not going to go away. So we have even more kids on our waiting list that need a tutor, because again, no one, when virtual learning started, a lot of our kids who were learning English, they were left behind. We had families that had a kindergartner and they didn't, both were learning English and they had to somehow navigate this new world. And so that's an immediate volunteer opportunity right there that we could take volunteers for now.
Well, I have learned so much from all of you, and I'm so grateful to you for spending this time with us today and for just being open with your stories, and John for sharing your knowledge about a very complicated and important issue. And now we know more about our neighbors and more about who's in Pittsburgh. And when we're back together again, which will happen, we will be able to see each other in the same room again. We'll be able to get to know each other. And I look forward to meeting you, Andrea, at some point, and John as well, Rosamaria, to seeing you again. And thank you so very much.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you for the invitation.